Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. Time now to go to New York and talk with Reggie Middleton of BoomBustBlog.com. Reggie Middleton, welcome to the Kaiser Report.
Well, thank you, sir.
All right, Reggie. Now, you write in a blog that ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, is literally starving J.P. Morgan. Now, this is the exact opposite of what most people would think. Explain that.
What ZIRP does, it lowers the cost of capital to effectively zero. If you lower the cost of capital to zero, people don't respect the capital. So you're not really giving out the capital, you're simply lowering the respect for the capital in the system. Through ZIRP, JP Morgan is not making any money on its interest-bearing assets. So everything that it's invested in, it has a much lower return. The common belief is that JP Morgan can borrow money at 0% and then invest it at XYZ%, and they capture the spread. It's free money. But again, there's nothing really free. JP Morgan is not doing business because A, capital is not respected, and B, the economy is in the doldrums. So there's really nowhere for them to do business. If you look at their metrics, all of their traditional banking businesses have been on a downtrend. Especially anything interest related or anything related to ZIRP has been on downtrend for the entire year.
Yeah, people understand that for the saver and the pension fund holder out there, if they're getting 0% on their investments, of course, they are starving to death. And the assumption, as you point out, is that the banks like JP Morgan are in fact benefiting by this because they're borrowing at 0 and investing at 2 or 3 or 4% and making that spread. But what you're saying is that basically the JP Morgan's in the same boat as everybody else, that they are literally starving themselves or burning the furniture to heat the house. At some point, that game is up, and what happens? JP Morgan simply declares bankruptcy? I mean, what do they have to fall back on if they're basically committing suicide banking, as I like to think of it?
Well, JP Morgan is a significant portion of the fabric of this economic environment, the U.S., so I think politically it'd be very difficult for JP Morgan to declare bankruptcy. Never rule it out, though, because that's not what I do. I look at things as they are and as I think they should be. What's going to happen no matter what, guaranteed, the bad assets are going to be purged from the economy, one way or the other. It's going to happen now, or it's going to happen sometime in the future.
Now, JP Morgan has a huge derivatives book, we know this, and you've done some work on, looked at this pretty closely. How does their derivatives book look these days?
It's big. JP Morgan's the largest by far. I have a cute graphic on my site that has the sovereign state of JP Morgan, where it has JP Morgan with $96 trillion or so notional derivative value, and that outstrips everybody else. When I say everybody else, that's the entire world. 96
trillion notional value in derivatives, and people bandy about big numbers out there that the total derivatives books of all these banks are $600–700 trillion, and is it expanding, is it contracting? So what is that as a percentage of the total derivatives out there in the system?
There are a lot of technical derivative guys who always comment, notional value is a nominal number, you can't really use it, but notional value does give you an indication of counterparty risk. So if you have $96 trillion of anything, and you have it with another party, you have $96 trillion of risk with another party. Now, if you take the market value of the fair value, the market value of JP Morgan's derivatives is much lower, but that is still a multiple of a good 20-something times JP Morgan's tangible equity. So, there's a significant amount of leverage there, and there's still a significant amount of risk. That $220-something trillion worth of notional derivative exposure is spread around 5 banks. 5 banks. So there's absolutely no way in the world, you can assume that these banks do not hedge almost all the derivative exposure in the world with each other. So if one bank goes down, it's going to drag everybody else along with it because they're simply borrowing money from each other or borrowing value and risk from each other.
So JP Morgan can you say that the stock has a book value? Does anyone know what the book value is, or is that, we don't talk about book value anymore, we just talk about a kind of a conceptual algorithmic value if certain conditions exist?
Well, I'm a stickler on these terms such as book value. Just to give you a quick overview of how I look at things, accountants in general, they tend to make relatively poor investors because they count business activity, okay? They don't count economic value. So in order to measure the value of something on the books, we have to look at both the risk and the reward. So if you look at book value, but you don't adjust it to the risk, that was taken to create that book value, you have a very incomplete picture of what's going on. With that being said, whether adjusted for risk or not, adjusted for risk would be economic book value, and not adjusted for risk would be the accounting book value. Either way, most people have absolutely no idea what JP Morgan's book value is, because they, like, and not to pick on JP Morgan, almost all the other banks have never come clean with the true market value of their assets. You know, the assets have to be marked to market in order to get a true value. The argument for the other side is, well, we don't want to mark long-term assets to market because we intend on keeping them long-term, which is nonsense. You know, they're worth what they're worth right now, and if you don't intend on selling them, then you don't intend on selling them. That's understood. But the value is what the value is.
Right. So it's a misnomer to use the phrase book value as it applies to banks currently, because none of them have any book value. They have enterprises which are based on gaming the system, and to that extent, they're able to pay themselves bonuses. But as an underlying viable business that does something constructive, no, there's nothing there. Time now to go to New York. Speak with Reggie Middleton of BoomBustBlog.com. Reggie Middleton, welcome back to the Kaiser Report.
It's good to be back.
Reggie Middleton, the last time you were on the Kaiser Report, you told us how 0% interest rates were starving the banks, that it was designed to save. Now, at the time, you were the only analyst in the world to mention that it would starve the banks, and you've been proven correct. So tell us more about this. What's the current status?
The current status is same as before. The banks are not making any real economic profit off of their interest-bearing assets, and they're taking losses on the liabilities, or on the assets that have become liabilities.